We're learning about the advocacy model of social engagement, which is exemplified by Martin Luther King Jr. When we look at American social life, we can speak of three spheres: the public sphere of government institutions and law, the civic sphere of voluntary associations, and the private sphere of friends and family. The advocacy model works across all three of these spheres. In short, community advocates work in the civic sphere to strengthen ties between disenfranchised private citizens and their elected officials in government. Typically, when a person engages in social advocacy, they participate in a nonprofit that does the work of community organizing. For King, this was the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Community organizers work with people in the organized civic groups of a neighborhood to identify concerns and teach the people how to more effectively petition the government on their own behalf. For King and the SCLC, this meant working with local civic groups and congregations throughout the South to help coordinate their public action in the civil rights movement. Advocacy means to speak up for what's right, especially in the face of injustice. When King writes about advocacy, he speaks about the importance of being specific. Advocacy seeks a specific goal for a specific group of people. Advocacy teaches people to bring their message to a target audience to build support for a specific policy goal. Christians find support for advocacy in the Exodus story. God hears the cries of the people and sends Moses to speak with Pharaoh about the needs of the people. Hebrew Bible prophets also work as advocates. Isaiah speaks of advocacy as a religious practice. We also see advocacy when Nathan confronts King David. Remember, the king had abused his power. First, when he slept with one of his subjects, Bathsheba, though she was married to one of his soldiers. Then, after she had become pregnant by the king, David tried unsuccessfully to cover it up. Finally, he ordered his generals to send his soldier Uriah to the front line where he died in battle. Nathan gives us an example of strategic speech. He tells the king a parable in which a wealthy landowner steals the sheep of a peasant for a feast instead of using one of the many sheep in his own flock. David condemns the man in the story, and Nathan reveals that the story is actually about David. Nathan gives us an example of strategic speech. Had he walked in and accused David of abusing his power, he could have been thrown out. But instead, Nathan leads David to see the situation from the perspective of those without power. After David does this, he condemns his own actions and repents. When advocates work effectively, they act similarly. They encourage people who have power to understand better the lives of powerless people in an effort to build support for public policy initiatives that alleviate poor people's burdens. Christians also see advocacy in Jesus' promise to send to the people a paraclete, the Holy Spirit. The word paraclete has roots in the political practices of ancient Rome. An advocate pleads a client's case to the local public official. Christian tradition associates the presence of the Holy Spirit with personal qualities such as wisdom, understanding, courage, and right judgment. They also associate the Holy Spirit with a practice called discernment of spirits. When a person acts as an advocate, they need these gifts. An advocate needs to listen to people and understand. She needs to be able to inspire people to take action and to teach them how to act effectively. She needs the emotional maturity to help people transform frustration and anger into courage. All of this requires emotional balance and the right spirit. In the civil rights movement, Black churches served as social movement midwives. We see this work as a form of advocacy. The churches empowered their members to effectively petition public officials for a just cause. They proposed a moral framework through which people could identify the injustices they faced. They hosted mass meetings where participants sang together, listened to speeches, and renewed their commitment to each other and to the movement. These churches also became a place for recruiting new movement participants through the personal network of the church's members. Christian ministers associated with the civil rights movement preached nonviolence. They taught their congregants to see their white neighbors who sought to retain the status quo not as evil people, but as people who had been caught in an evil system. Catholic tradition uses the term social sin to name a set of social institutions where responsibility and accountability get diffused, but the system nevertheless results in unjust outcomes. For example, a person who runs a business charges her customers enough to cover her costs and turn a profit. Those who manufacture the products she purchases to run her business may pollute the environment or pay their workers unjust wages. The insurance available to her employees through her business may deny the employees coverage when they file medical claims. Her workers may not be able to afford housing near her business. She's not culpable for the injustices that surround her business, but she contributes to the system, and her business depends on it. Yet on her own, she probably does not have enough power to change things. Though she is not personally culpable for these injustices, Catholic social teaching encourages each citizen to learn to recognize injustice and consider how to respond. An international organization called Catholic Action developed a three-step process called See, Judge, and Act, or the pastoral cycle. People use the pastoral cycle to guide effective social action. It starts with learning to see the human environmental impacts of social systems. Because social relationships can be complex, we often turn to social analysis to trace relationships between and across social institutions. For example, in the United States, low-income families are more likely to be served by less effective public schools, and wealthy families by more effective public schools. How does this happen? Several social institutions produce this pattern. Most children in the U.S. go to school in their own neighborhood. The funding for the school comes from property taxes raised in that neighborhood. Zoning rules determine the density of the housing in that neighborhood. People access the housing in the neighborhood through the market. They can only live where they can afford to live. So the neighborhoods with the largest homes have the highest cost per square foot. Wealthy residents who can afford them, and high property taxes that support a quality school. In another part of town, we find a neighborhood with many 1- and 2-bedroom apartments, people who can afford these lower-cost housing options, lower property taxes, and a less well-funded school. So the wealth of a child's parents roughly corresponds with access to quality education. The next two steps of the pastoral circle encourage people to use their ethical values and religious beliefs to reflect on this situation, and to act to promote a more just outcome as their conscience guides. But social action takes courage. In Catholic tradition, courage is seen as a virtuous balance between cowardly indifference and reckless rage. The passion that motivates courageous action is ire, or anger. Ernesto Cortez is a legendary community organizer affiliated with the Industrial Areas Foundation, or IAF. When people become aware of injustice, they often feel angry. But the kind of anger that supports effective social action is cold anger. People need to care enough about the injustice to take action, but if advocacy stokes the fires of destructive rage, it threatens to undermine the community's goals. Effective social action also requires that people learn how to build the social bases for power. Many Christians become uncomfortable with the language of power. They may see power as a source of evil and understand Jesus' cross as a renunciation of power and its temptations. If we understand power as the ability to effectively pursue our goals, we can judge our uses of power by judging the goals we pursue and the way we pursue them. Catholic social teaching speaks of just power as using power with others rather than wielding power over others. When we use our power as advocates, we do not tell disenfranchised people what to do or claim to speak on their behalf. Rather, we work to empower a community to petition government officials effectively on their own behalf. Political scientist Sidney Verba uses the word voice as a metaphor for effective political power in a democracy. We want people to have a political voice that is loud and clear. In a democracy, ultimately, voters are the most effective check on economic or cultural power. To increase the volume of our political voices, we need to learn how to mobilize people and motivate them to support our goals. To make our political voices clear, we need to learn how to deliver a message effectively to our target audiences using the media resources we can access. Advocacy requires skill, but it also calls for the right spirit. Catholic tradition sees personal virtue cultivated through spiritual practices as a valuable asset in pursuit of social justice. Our spiritual lives help us maintain the perspective and emotional dispositions we need to effectively advocate for justice by acting with other people and for other people.